The story begins with an atmosphere of absolute tension in a quiet residential neighborhood in Idaho. A heavily armed military police unit, accompanied by tactical dogs, surrounds a house as its owner, Anita Budahas, arrives at the scene in desperation. The commanding officer coldly informs her that her husband, Colonel Robert Budahas, has violated national security protocols by stealing a vehicle from the base. When the soldiers enter the house, they find the colonel barricaded inside the bathroom, in a catatonic state. His body is shaking violently, and his skin is covered with strange reddish welts. Despite his wife's screams and pleas, the military forces him out, claiming he urgently requires medical treatment. 4 months later, the scene shifts to a dimly lit bar in Washington, D.C. Mulder and Scully meet to discuss the case, after Anita Budahas reported her husband's disappearance to the FBI, describing it as a kidnapping when she received no further information about his whereabouts. Mulder reveals to Scully that this is not an isolated incident. Budahas is the 6th pilot to disappear from Ellens Air Force Base since 1963. The common thread is that all of them were test pilots for experimental aircraft. Scully remains skeptical, arguing that this is a matter of military security and not something that qualifies as an X-file. Mulder, however, suspects the government is hiding something far more significant. While Scully steps away for a moment, Mulder heads to the bar's restroom, where he is intercepted by an enigmatic man who seems to know everything about him. This man, later known as Deep Throat, sternly warns Mulder to stay away from the Ellens Air Force Base investigation. He assures him that the military will not tolerate FBI interference and that Mulder's life is in danger. Mulder is shaken by how much the stranger knows, but when he tries to follow him out to get answers, the man vanishes without a trace into the crowd. Back at FBI headquarters, Scully examines records from the base and discovers that, although it is officially listed as a testing site for stealth aircraft technology, the installation has gained a legendary reputation among UFO enthusiasts. That same night, Mulder receives a phone call from Scully at his apartment and immediately notices strange interference on the line. When he looks out the window, he confirms his suspicion. A black van is parked on the street, watching him. Their phones are clearly being tapped. Despite the threats and constant surveillance, Mulder becomes more determined than ever and convinces Scully to travel to Idaho to confront the situation directly. Upon arriving in Southwest City, the agents meet with Anita Budahas, who receives them in a state of deep emotional distress. She explains that before disappearing, her husband Robert not only suffered from severe skin rashes, but his personality had become unstable. He would shift from sudden aggression to moments of empty, distant staring, as if his mind had been erased. Anita emphasizes, however, that one thing never changed: his unwavering patriotism and loyalty to his country. During the conversation, she mentions that something very similar happened to her neighbor, Verla McLennan. The only difference is that Verla's husband eventually returned home after being taken by the military. Mulder and Scully cross the yard to speak with the neighbors. On the porch, they find Mr. McLennan compulsively pulling hair from his own head to make fishing lures, completely disconnected from his surroundings. His wife, Verla, behaves with an unsettling calm and a forced smile. She insists that her husband's condition is simply the result of stress and repeatedly thanks the Air Force for the treatment he received. Suddenly, her demeanor shifts. She angrily scolds Anita for involving the FBI, revealing a deep fear of military retaliation. Anita hands the agents a list of phone numbers she found in her house, all of which she tried calling without success. Scully notices that only one contact responds, a colonel named Kissel. She manages to schedule a meeting, but not for another 2 weeks. Unwilling to wait, Mulder looks up Kissel's address in the phone book, and they decide to confront him in person. When they arrive at his home, Colonel Kissel reacts with hostility. He refuses to cooperate and orders them to leave immediately. At that moment, a man named Paul Mossinger approaches. He introduces himself as a local journalist interested in the case and attempts to interview the agents. Mulder refuses to make any statements to the press. Before leaving, Mulder asks Mossinger if he has ever seen UFOs in the area. Mossinger responds with skepticism and subtle mockery, but suggests they visit a nearby bar frequented by tourists and UFO enthusiasts. Inside the bar, surrounded by aviation-themed decor, the owner shows them photographs of strange lights captured over the base. While Mulder focuses on the reported sightings, Scully notices something far more significant on a map. Ellen's Air Force Base has been completely erased from official cartography. When they leave the bar, Mulder is carrying a handwritten note with the base's exact location, which they keep strictly confidential. The agents leave the main highway and begin to encounter military warning signs threatening the use of lethal force. As night falls, Mulder decides they should stay and observe the area. Scully, visibly irritated and speaking with sarcastic humor, criticizes the idea, claiming it is pointless to sit in the middle of nowhere waiting for flying saucers. Hours later, while Scully sleeps in the car, a deafening blast shakes the vehicle and shatters the rear window. Mulder wakes her in alarm and tells her to look at the sky. Above the base, strange lights perform maneuvers impossible for any conventional aircraft. They remain perfectly still, then suddenly accelerate at incredible speeds. While Scully theorizes that the lights could be powerful laser projections or advanced flares controlled from the ground, both agents remain transfixed until the lights vanish without warning. Moments later, a helicopter approaches and two teenagers, Emil and Zoe, appear running after jumping the perimeter fence. Mulder and Scully chase them and manage to intercept them, hiding together beneath a tree to avoid being detected by military patrols. Later, inside a small restaurant, the teenagers explain that they have been sneaking into the base for some time just to watch the lights. They speak of a place known as Yellow Base, a massive hangar surrounded by landmines, where aircraft are stored that float in complete silence. As they talk outside the restaurant, a car watches the agents. Inside the vehicle, the driver receives radio instructions to maintain surveillance. Convinced the teenagers are telling the truth, Mulder pulls out a photograph from the alleged 1947 Roswell incident and compares it with one of the images taken at the bar. He becomes firmly convinced that the military is flying aircraft built using reverse-engineered extraterrestrial technology. Back at the motel, Scully bursts into Mulder's room with shocking news. Colonel Budahas has returned home. The agents rush there immediately, but they find Mrs. Budahas terrified. She insists that although the man looks exactly like her husband, he is not him. Mulder attempts to question the colonel with basic personal questions, which he answers correctly. However, when Mulder asks a highly technical question about flight maneuvers that only an experienced pilot would know, the man goes completely blank, showing total confusion. As they leave, Mulder tells Scully that the pilot's brain has been reconfigured through selective memory draining. Scully counters that stress-induced amnesia is the only scientifically plausible explanation. While driving along a deserted highway, still arguing about Budahas's condition, Mulder and Scully are suddenly intercepted and boxed in by two black vehicles. Several unidentified government agents step out, men in black. Without presenting any credentials, they search the car and confiscate all evidence, including Mulder's photographs and notes. When Mulder tries to protest, one of the men violently slams him against the hood of the car and warns them to leave town immediately if they do not want to suffer the consequences of violating national security. Back at the motel, Mulder is convinced the military knew they were there all along, and that Colonel Budahas was returned, only to close the case and force them to leave. He tells Scully that his phone is being tapped and finally reveals his encounter with the mysterious informant in Washington. Concerned for his safety, Scully insists that their mission is over now that the missing man has reappeared. Mulder pretends to give up but waits for the moment she lets her guard down. Then, without warning, he speeds off alone. Mulder returns to find the teenagers, Emil and Zoe, who show him a hole in the base's perimeter fence. They refuse to go inside with him, terrified of being discovered. Mulder enters the base alone and makes his way toward the runway. In total darkness, a triangular aircraft silently descends and hovers directly above him, flooding him with a blinding white light. The moment of awe is brief. Military jeeps suddenly appear from all directions. Mulder is captured and restrained. He is placed on a gurney and injected with a substance that leaves him semi-conscious. As he is transported away, he glimpses, through a plastic curtain, a massive hangar where personnel are working on aircraft of unknown technology. Then everything fades to black. Meanwhile, Scully searches desperately for Mulder and realizes that the journalist Paul Mossinger is following her. After a brief confrontation, she notices that Mossinger's car contains a military radio and that he carries base identification. Scully manages to disarm him and takes him hostage. With the help of the teenagers, Scully reaches the entrance of the base and demands an exchange, Mossinger for Mulder. The exchange is made. Mulder is returned, dazed and disoriented, with no memory of what he saw inside the runway. Days later, Mulder attempts to visit the Budahas' home, but Anita, visibly frightened and clearly under pressure, shuts the door in his face. She insists that everything is fine and that she never wants to see them again. Back in Washington, Scully writes her official report, formally stating that the case is closed. While she acknowledges the strange circumstances, she refuses to support Mulder's theories involving extraterrestrial technology. The episode ends with Mulder meeting Deep Throat once again, this time at a running track. The informant warns him that he is in grave danger. Mulder responds with quiet frustration, lamenting that although he saw the truth with his own eyes, it was erased from his mind. Deep Throat walks away, but not before implicitly confirming that extraterrestrials have been present on Earth for a very long time. If you enjoyed this episode and want to dive deeper into the paranormal, then you know the truth is still out there. I have plenty of other X-Files episode summaries right here on the channel covering everything from government conspiracies to unexplained encounters. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more mysteries, and don't forget to check out the full playlist to catch up on the entire series. Trust no one, and I will see you in the next case.